What's up, everyone? My name is Kaylina and I am the Hex Witch, and today I have a very cool book review for you. Recently, I just read The Witch's Guide to the Paranormal. It is by J. Allen Cross. This is what it looks like. And right off the bat, I have to say I give this a 5 out of 5 stars. This has great information. It has just a lot of good things that you can actually do yourself and focus on yourself, and it feels very real life. Like, it's practical things, that's the word I was looking for, practical things that you can implement when dealing with spirits. And so let's dive into the review. So it's only about 238 pages, but it is chock full of awesome information. So for instance, he starts it off with like basic witchcraft, and being interested in the paranormal myself as well as being a witch, I like how he implemented every chapter is just helpful. So for the basic witchcraft, he goes into all about intention and willpower and your mental magic, as well as talks about the importance of grounding. He does this for a living, so he has clients all the time and deals with the paranormal on a regular basis. And so he definitely talks about the importance of being grounded and being willpower and having strong energy to you, and talks about psychic shielding and aura maintenance and sensing energy and all the different techniques that you can do to accomplish this. Because in the paranormal realm, as you'll hear about later, entities feed off of human energy. And most of the time, if it's a bad energy, it loves when you're afraid. So in this line of business, in order to keep that spirit from gaining power over you, you have to stay very calm, you have to stay very grounded. And so he gives you different techniques on how you can achieve this. I also love how this book, everything stacks on top of each other very nicely. It flows very easily. It's very easy to understand. It's easy to read. Just has a really nice flow to it. And he starts from the basics and he just continues to go up and up and up and describe things in a very clear and organized manner. So I really enjoy that about this. He also talks about cleansing and clearing and a list of different ways that you can achieve this. And relatively, a lot of these things are very simple. I feel like when we get into paranormal, sometimes we think it's this big, complicated process of getting rid of a spirit or even communicating with them. And it's not. It does not have to be this big, blown up deal. And a lot of times in movies and TV, that's what it's made to seem. And that's not always the case. So he talks about, incense and sound and smoke and water and fire and salt. And he uses simple things, practical things that we can all use and take away. I love the use of his black candles and how he uses them, because black candles have a very they suck things in. So they can even trap a spirit that way. By sucking in that energy, it takes in that energy. He also goes into types of mediums, and as well as focusing on the different clairs. So I love how he writes at the beginning, everybody has a ghost story. And it's true. I feel like everybody, even if we didn't realize it, has come across a spirit at some point in our life. We've walked into a space and we've just felt weird about it. Like, we couldn't explain it. We couldn't put a finger on why it felt weird. It just did, and we felt uncomfortable. Or, you'll have some people will see physical apparitions or see things move or will be touched by an invisible hand. Like, everybody's got a ghost story to a certain extent. And he talks about how the different clairs and how we sense spirits in different ways. So he sees spirits, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't kind of a medium or you aren't sensitive to spirit if you can't see them. There are plenty of people that sense them in many different other ways, such as hearing them, like clairaudience. That's usually how I sense spirit, as well as being able to feel them. I can feel energies off of things and spaces. There's like several different clairs. I think there's like 4 or 5 of them, but you can fall under different ones. And so you don't always have to just see them to be able to be considered a medium. There's also different subcategories of mediums, such as mental, evidential, platform, rescue, trance, and physical. And those can go as low as just being able to sense them and see them, as far as actually allowing a spirit to possess you in order to speak to people or communicate. That I would not be okay with. I know there's some people out there, but I definitely feel like it's a more rare form of mediumship, and one that is usually done in a group, because you really have to elevate the energy up in order for that medium to be able to be possessed by the spirit. So I don't feel like you see that one quite as often. I love how he talks about meditation. Like meditation, everybody, you know, when you get asked, well, how can I start becoming more in tune with this kind of stuff? And meditation is a great way to do that. Just being able to sit in quiet and listen to what the universe is trying to tell you. And I feel like sometimes you can get radio waves of spirit activity. Like sometimes when I meditate, I will just hear random sentences, random words, and it's almost like the staticky like sound, as if I'm tuning into a radio. And most of the time it doesn't make a bit of sense, not a bit of sense. But I feel like if anyone else has had that occurrence happen to them and can explain it to me, that would be great, because I'm still working on being even more in tune. I'm getting there, and I definitely feel like there are lots of moments where I do tune in, but I would still love to hear from like actual experts in this kind of stuff, because it is seriously mind-blowing some of the stuff that can occur. He also just talks about taking your time. You have to have the patience for this. It's not just going to come like super easily. I mean, some people do just have a natural ability for it, but if everyone's psychic to a certain extent, but a lot of the time we just shut it down and we shove it down because we're either afraid of it, or it's intimidating, or we don't want to sound like we're crazy, because a lot of people in the world don't tune into that kind of stuff. In fact, a lot of people would just prefer to be kind of blind to it. And that's okay. That's okay. If you don't want to be involved in it or see it or feel it, perfectly okay. But for a lot of us, we all have that in us, but we don't know how to reactivate it. And so taking your time, focusing on that meditation, allowing yourself silence and to be able to tune into things that you wouldn't normally notice is a great start, a really great start. And be patient with yourself. This stuff doesn't just happen. Like, you have to be kind of patient, and you have to be able to take your time. And that's another thing I feel like TV gets kind of wrong. You know, a paranormal investigation team in an hour-long video, they're cutting and pasting things for when the action actually happened. But they could be there hours, they could be there days before they actually get any activity. And sometimes they may get no activity at all. It purely depends on what's there and what actually wants to communicate. So another reason why TV is not always very accurate. Jay Allen talks about in one section different code of ethics, and I think this is really important because and obviously this is based on his job. So if you're just going out and doing a paranormal investigation, some of these things may not apply to you, but I do want to read them off and kind of talk about them a little bit, because I feel like we don't always think about some of the things in this that would actually apply to these paranormal investigations. So he says, always seek the truth. And I find that to be a very powerful one, because once again, I'm using TV because we see it so often, but TV over dramatizes things. You know, they want views, they want people to watch it, so they make it seem way more dramatic than it actually is, so that people tune in. And the thing is with that is that if you're doing real world investigations, real world paranormal stuff, some of that stuff is not realistic. It's not going to happen. And I feel like some people are very disappointed when, things don't go flying across the room. It's like, well, that's just not gonna happen most likely. And if you are working with clients, you want to be truthful. There's a very sensitive balance of being very firm and honest with people and not sugarcoating what's going on, but also realizing that they're not acquainted to seeing paranormal stuff on a daily basis. So even the smallest nuance of disturbance may be really scary for them. So it's kind of a thin line of how you handle a situation. Investigation is a sober affair. Also on TV, you see these investigations, they're very exciting. People are ecstatic to be getting paranormal activity, and even sometimes speaking with darker entities and stuff. It excites people. And you've got to realize that, once again, if you're dealing with clients, they're probably scared shitless. They want this thing out. They don't want it there anymore. It's causing disturbances. It's scaring the family members. They can't live their normal lives. They may not be sleeping well at night. So even if you have a personal interest in the paranormal and it kind of excites you, you need to kind of keep that on the DL if you're working with a client that's legitimately terrified. Respect the spirits. When you watch TV and you see people egging the spirits on, yelling at them to do stuff, that is so disrespectful, guys. And be careful what you ask for, because there are spirits out there who will give you exactly what you want, and you will realize very fast that it's not what you wanted at all. You hear stories about, haunted dolls and how people will do something, blink your eyes, do something to me. And they may not do it in that moment, but later in life, when you're not even expecting it, you hear people getting in car crashes, you hear them getting into fatal accidents. This is not a joke, guys. You have to respect these spirits, because whether they were humans at one point or if they're inhuman entities, they can be dangerous. And at the end of the day, just like how we should respect normal people, we should respect things from other realms and other dimensions and other spirits. Respect the environment. You may come across, there are spirits around us all the time, guys. All the time. Even if we don't see them, feel them, sense them, they're there, especially in our environment. Fae, elementals, forest spirits, they are there a lot, and that is their territory, that is their home. And when we come and kind of desecrate it, it can stir up commotion, and it can make them very angry, and things will happen. And so just being respectful of the environment. And it even talks about later in the book, if you're going into a certain area, almost asking permission. And you may get a sense of yes or no. You may hear it in your head, but you've got to respect that wish. So if there's spirits there that do not want you around, it's best to just skedaddle and keep moving, because they can get very protective and angry. So just being aware and respectful of that. Another thing that he writes is prioritizing the living humans. So it's very easy when you're doing paranormal investigations to get very involved with the spirits, because obviously that's part of the reason why you're there, is learning more about them, communicating with them. But the way he does it is, when you're working with clients, is you want to be respectful of the people living there, and they kind of take first priority. A spirit that is haunting a house, if it's not doing any damage or any harm, the family may be okay with keeping it there. But if it is being very disruptive and being kind of just harmful and negative, the people that live there now, they get the house. The spirit has to move on. They've had their time there. It's time for them to move on. Know your limits. I think there's a ton of people that are interested in the paranormal but are not very educated in it. And I think it's something that sometimes, not everybody, but I think sometimes people can be kind of willy-nilly with it. And then later they realize maybe that wasn't the smartest idea. And And if you are a person that is going into houses and helping clear spirits, you want to know your limits. If you don't feel comfortable handling a certain spirit, don't do it. Please call in someone that's more, you know, that's had more experience with that certain entity or spirit, because you could inevitably make things worse, and that's not going to help anything. Another one is be honest, which I think is sort of similar to seek your truth. Just being honest with your clients, being honest with yourself, not being afraid to say I don't know. And then lastly, be safe. Take every measure of protection. Wear protective amulets, crosses, pentagrams, sigils of protection, anything that, don't be afraid to maybe bring some herbs with you to sage afterwards. It's important to keep yourself safe, because it is much easier to have a attachment than you think. In fact, when I was at the Victory of Light tour recently, and I talked to, we got to listen to a paranormal investigation group, and they said that, not to like scare people, but at some point in time, most people that they see will have some kind of entity kind of attached to them. And it could just be a fleeting attachment. It could be something a little bit more serious. And I mean, if you have an attachment, this book says you will know. Like, there's no, oh, do I have an attachment? You're gonna know. You're gonna feel drained all the time. Things are just gonna be weird and off. So you're gonna know if you have an attachment. But it's not uncommon at some point in your life to maybe have something kind of following you. So you've got to be careful. You do have to be really careful. It can be exciting. It can be interesting. It's very scientific, wanting to know what's on the other side, but just doing it safely and with caution. I like how he talks about the different teams and the different roles that each team member will play in an investigation. Because there are lots of roles. There's the medium, then there's the people that kind of document all of the stuff. And documentation is actually a big part of this, because there's also like research and researching the background of a house or a space, and really having all your notes together so that you can conduct this investigation in the best way you can. They also have a debunker who, might be someone who specializes in electrician or plumbing or just houses in general, so that they know the common signs of a house that might just be old versus something that might be paranormal. He also talks about the different paranormal terminology, and when you're in that world, the different terminology that you're going to hear spoken of a lot, the different tools and technology that can be used during investigations, such as your, EMFs, your K2s, your spirit boxes, your ovulus. They also talk about trigger objects and how certain spirits, when they were alive, may react to certain objects. So if somebody was like a heavy drinker, having just alcohol there might trigger them to communicate with you. Or, if it's a child, a lot of time investigators will bring toys, because that child will interact with them more and make them more comfortable. You do want to be careful with trigger objects, though, because if it's something, for instance, if you're in an asylum and you bring in doctors' tools of some sort, and it might have been very scarring and scary to that living person when they were alive, it's kind of mean, kind of mean to have them relive that in death. So just be mindful of that. Sometimes the reaction and the communication isn't worth traumatizing, a spirit. I love how he goes in depth about conducting an investigation, like from start to finish, what to do. And then he also really drives home that once an investigation is closed, once the spirit is gone, they've banished it, they've cleansed it, they've unattached it from the space, to move on like nothing has happened. So, and obviously this is dealing with a home that you're trying to exorcise a spirit from. But they said it's really important to move on and not talk about it a whole bunch, because otherwise it almost invites the spirit back in. And there's going to be kind of that in-between time where you want to be cleansing constantly. You don't want to talk about it. You want to make sure that you're bringing in fresh energy, good energy, music, inviting people over that you like, filling that void with good energy. Otherwise, if you're not careful, you can just invite the spirit right back in. So just moving on and not really talking about it. Mentioning it once or twice is going to be fine, from what he said, but if you're really focusing on it, it's going to invite it back in. The next section is kind of a broad section. It's all about different hauntings and what the hauntings are and different ways that you would get rid of them. And so he also talks about different agreements and that we make with spirits that we may not even realize that we're doing, and how you become haunted, because he says that we have to make agreements with spirits no matter what. Like if there's a spirit in the house, to a certain extent, we have to allow it to be there. And so some people would say, well, why is there ever any hauntings then? Because a lot of people would not want a haunting to happen to them. But agreements can be very simple. It can just be the initial act of being afraid of it that allows it to feed off of your energy and it allows it to be there. So he goes into detail about that. He talks about Feng Shui, which I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, I might have, but it's all about arranging your home in a way that allows energy to flow through it. Because if energy gets stagnant and stuck, you can sometimes get energy that almost appears like a spirit, but it's not. It's just stuck energy, and the area will feel very heavy, or there just may be, if a fight broke out and we didn't cleanse the space, or there's nowhere for that energy to go, it might just get stuck there and we'll feel residual feelings of it. And so just making sure you have a nice flow to your house or a nice flow to the area that you're in, because it can trap spirits because the energy has nowhere to flow. The first one he talks about is residual hauntings. So these are hauntings that aren't actually spirits. So they're more of just an impression. They're a imprint left behind by something that happened. Energy, as we know, can't be like created or destroyed. It's there. So little bits of energy, if something tragic or horrible happened, it can be imprinted there. And these residual hauntings, they will be very specific. So they won't interact with us. It's almost like they're on a time loop. So they just keep repeating the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And they're not aware, but the same thing will happen at the exact same time, like every day. So at 3 o'clock, you'll hear something walking up the stairs. At 3 o'clock, you'll hear the crying of a woman. At 2 o'clock, a woman will stand in front of your bed, and they're not going to react with you because they're not like an intuitive, smart spirit. It's just an impression that was left behind. Then you've got your earthbound human spirits, which these are exactly what they sound like. They're humans that they were humans at one point and they have passed on. And earthbound spirits will stay for a lot of different reasons. They'll either be watching over a family member. They may have unfinished business. The one that really surprised me was sometimes the living will hold on to a spirit so much that they can't pass on. So like the living won't let them go. And that one, like I said, surprised me, because you obviously, when someone passes away, you miss them very dearly. But if you're missing them so much that you're keeping their spirit attached and they can't pass on, that's actually not a very good thing. Because Jay Allen discusses in this book that when he comes across earthbound spirits, he tries very hard to help encourage them to pass on to the next life, because there are certain parasites and different dark entities that will actually feed off of earthbound spirits, and they will like collect them, and they will become these like monstrous things with like souls attached to them. Frightening stuff, things like out of your worst nightmares. But he usually tries to encourage them to pass on, especially if they're like watching over family members. He tells them you can still watch over them and you can still come back from the other side to take care of them. But you don't want to be earthbound. As humans, our spirits are not supposed to be in the in-between for very long. We're either supposed to be living or we're supposed to be passed on. Because if we stay in this in-between space for too long, first of all, we have to use human energy to survive. So that's why in a lot of busy areas, you may have a lot of spirit activity because they're all feeding off of our energy because they need that in order to survive. If they don't have that, they kind of just fade away, and they almost go through this process of they turn kind of mad, and then they just kind of dissipate into nothing. So it's really not great if they stick around for a long period of time. Some can stick around for quite a while if they had a very for sure purpose on the earth. For instance, you hear of, I think he referenced a certain house where this woman, she was kind of she opened I can't remember if it was a boarding house, but kind of where she had people there all the time, and her job was to take care and run that place. And so in the afterlife, she stuck around, and she kind of keeps the spirits there at bay. And so she has a very specific role. So she's been able to stick around for a very long time, but that's unusual when it comes to spirits. He also gives concrete ways that you can actually open the light to the other side up to allow those spirits to pass on, which I think is so powerful. The fact that we actually have that power to be able to help other spirits pass on who have become stuck for whatever reason, that's really cool. Really, really cool. Let's see here. The next one is poltergeists, which poltergeists are super interesting. It's a total phenomenon that it's very unusual. And it's created by us. Our energy becomes so powerful that it creates its own kind of living thing. And most of the time it's created by a child, specifically girls who are going through puberty, because their bodies are going through so much change and there's so much emotion and physical change attached to it that it can actually become its own entity. And so with these poltergeists, you will have occurrences such as things stacking on top of each other, things being thrown across the room. There have been known cases of small fires starting. They'll mimic voices, and they'll sometimes even create indoor weather effects. It'll start raining inside or snowing inside. And you'll also, I guess a common thing with poltergeist are wet spots. So you'll have random wet spots, which is really interesting. But poltergeists, most of the time they don't last for too long. They can be around for up to 2 years, but most of the time they're around for a few months at a time. And then most of the time, if you tell the child that they are creating this energy, most of the time it'll go away because they probably aren't wanting to do that, but their energy is just so strong that it's creating that. So if you kind of explain to them what's going on, it'll usually dissipate. Next, you've got your inhuman spirits, and this is a very broad category. So you've got your fae, your elementals, your forest spirits, your shadow people, animal spirits, demonic entities. Angels will fall under this. Anything that you've read in fairy tales, anything that you've heard of in folklore, all of this fits in inhuman spirits. And inhuman spirits can be good or they can be very bad. So you just want to be kind of courteous when you come across inhuman spirits, or if you try to interact with them. Be very, very cautious and know your stuff. Read up on them, because their code of ethics is not the same as ours. Their rationality is not the same as us. So they can be very tricksters. They can be mean. They can cause harm, and they'll think it's funny. They won't care. Their empathy is not always the same as ours. That's not to say that there aren't good spirits, because obviously angels are very protective. You have things such as brownies that are a type of fae that are usually very helpful. But as a whole, you kind of want to be careful around this group of entities. Um, you want to be very respectful of their territory. You don't want to trespass into their area without permission. You certainly do not want to steal things. You will hear stories of people going into sacred places and taking just something as simple as a rock, and they will all of a sudden have tons of bad luck that follows suit because they took this rock from a sacred site and probably pissed off a spirit. So, and the bad luck doesn't stop until they return the rock back to its place. So just be aware of that. He does mention a lot about Michael, the archangel, and how I love how he describes him. He describes him as a Dean Winchester type, which just makes me love Michael all the more because I love Supernatural and I love Dean. He's like my favorite character in there. And he said that Michael, if you call upon him, he's very helpful and is always very willing to come down and slay whatever needs to be slayed. He also mentions Hecate and how she has a very powerful like energy and source, but she also has a lot of other spirits that she brings with her. So just being mindful of if you're in somebody's house and they are very Christian or they follow a very certain viewpoint, or whatever religion they are, just be aware of that and be respectful of it, because they may not appreciate you bringing in Hecate if they don't believe in her or don't want kind of some of her chaotic energy. So just watch out for that. And then our last category is negative entities. And pretty much this is anything that's going to manipulate you, try to harm you, and they feed on human energy. And these guys are scary. They will have a scary appearance, usually claws, teeth, very disformed. They're going to be very frightening. And they do that for a reason, because they want you to be afraid of them. They want you to invite that fear in, such as making an agreement, even if we didn't try to, and that's when they can hurt us. He mentions that the key is to not be afraid, which is obviously easier said than done, because these entities are scary. They are going to be scary. They're going to look scary. They are going to feel scary. Everything about them is going to be terrifying and frightening. But our fear is what gives them the power over us. So if we can be brave and tell them the what's what, they cannot hurt us. They will come close. They will make you think that whatever you're doing to get rid of them isn't working. They will throw things so that it comes very close to you. But as long as you do not show them fear, they can't actually harm you, which I think is just, I didn't realize that about spirits before, but now I know. So it gives me a very different outlook on spirits, of still being wary of them, but realizing I'm in control. I get to decide the situation and what happens. So if I don't want them around, they're not going to be around. They're not going to hurt me. They cannot attach to me. They cannot be in my space. So you just have to set very firm rules for them. But they will sense dread. They will sense fear. You will see animals start to act weird. Ever have that cat who just at 12 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock in the morning just stares at a wall, and you're like, what the heck is there? Because I can't see anything, but it's very clear that they can. And animals are very in tune with the spirit realm. They can see things a lot easier than we can. They can sense things a lot easier than we can. So if an animal is acting weird, that may be an indication that something might be going on. Scratching and biting. So negative entities will scratch and bite. Earthbound spirits will do more of the pushing, shoving, just touching, maybe pinching. But darker entities will do the more harmful stuff like scratching and biting. You also may notice sleep paralysis. Like they will, like if I actually had an instance of this the other night, surprisingly, where I had this horrible bad dream. I woke up, I didn't have really sleep paralysis, but I definitely had a feeling that something had been like pressing into my chest. I do not normally cry or hyperventilate, but I did. And then I just felt like there was this very dark energy in the room. And I screamed at it, to be honest. Kind of screamed at it, told it to go away. It wasn't welcome. Pretty much told it to get that effing out of my house. And then played really high vibrational music. And I felt the energy lift. But Yeah, it was not an experience I was used to, and it was literally like right after I had kind of meditated and asked for my third eye to open. So with that, you're gonna probably get the good and the bad, and you just have to learn to kind of sort it out. Um, but then, like I mentioned before, he talks about the agreements and how simple things can be agreements. Sometimes they will target children, which is really sad and not great, but because children are so open and inviting and invisible friends are not uncommon, but that's somehow how they sometimes will weasel their way into a household. Um, he talks about the Bogart effect in like Harry Potter, how if you turn an entity into something funny, that it can actually take its power away from it. Which, yeah, who doesn't want to picture Snape in a old woman's outfit with a funny hat? I mean, make it funny. Do whatever you have to do to release the tension that you're most likely going to feel. I also kind of reminds me of It, the movie It, and how in the second movie, once they started laughing at him and making fun of him and demoralizing him, that all of a sudden he became powerless. And I feel like that's very much the same effect. Jay Allen goes into the fact that these negative entities will make nests within your home. So they will pick a certain spot, usually a basement, usually an attic, somewhere that people aren't traipsing through a lot, and they will take roots and then slowly begin to infect the rest of the house. He said, you're going to know where the nest is. It's going to feel very negative. This entity may try to keep you out of it. He may even influence the people of the household to tell you that, oh no, that's just a closet. There's nothing important in there, but it may actually be the nesting spot. He talks about the different ways to exercise, remove the energy from the nest, remove the spirits, remove a spirit if they're attached to an actual person, which becomes a little bit more complicated than if it's just haunting a house. He goes into your magical toolkit of just the simple things that you can use: candles, blessed items, creating boundaries, creating oils, praying novenas, bottles, spirit bottles. He also has a section of different recipes of how you make these things yourself. Of course, you can always go out and buy them if you don't feel like comfortable making them yourself, or you want somebody who's a professional who's been doing it for a long time who can infuse it with the energy that it needs. But different recipes for oils, powders, sprays. He also goes into making like blessed holy water, which you don't have to have a priest for, I found out. So the last part of the section, he talks about like portals and doorways and highways. These are really interesting. These are how like spirits will come in and out. Most of the time, if you have a portal or doorway or a highway, you're going to have a lot of different kinds of spiritual activity. So it's not going to be like a residual energy where you just have the same thing every single night. You're going to have different spiritual activity every day. So, and that's usually how you know you have one of those three things. He gives you exercises of how you can change the direction of a portal. So if a portal is coming into your house, he teaches you how to change it to go outside of your house. He teaches you how you can sometimes move highways to go, if you have a highway going straight through your house due to like a certain kind of water under your ground or a certain kind of like quartz crystal that might be under there. These are channels that make it very easy for spirits to flow through. But you can actually move the highway so that it goes like up over the house and then back down once it's away from the house. He did say though that sometimes it's inevitable. There's not tons you can do for it. You can try, but sometimes there's not a lot you can do with that certain situation. And then the last part of the book was working with clients, being firm but yet understanding. He talked about the different kinds of people that you may work with, and just how you would go about handling them in the best, most respectful but professional manner. And overall, I just loved how he wrote this book in such a way that anybody, if they feel comfortable and have the right intention, right willpower, can handle a lot of these things. If you don't feel comfortable, great, bring someone else that's been doing it a long time in. Obviously, you know your limits, but these are things that a lot of us can do. And he taught, be wary of them and careful, but don't be afraid. that we have more control and power over these things than we even know. Lastly, before I close out, because this video is very long, a couple of experiences. So I work in a haunted hotel. I work at the Elms in Excelsior Springs. I work in their spa. I'm a massage therapist. And that hotel has been known to be very haunted. And I have had couple of experiences. I've just started working there for not very long, but so I think the entities there are getting used to me and I'm getting used to them. But we have these huge big laundry baskets like on wheels, and they're very, very heavy. And so I was standing in the hallway with this other girl, and we were like by ourselves, and the floor is completely flat. And these things are heavy and they've got like brakes on them. So it takes a lot to move them. But all of a sudden it just like moves by itself, like just moves by itself. Like there's no reason it should have moved. I'm pretty sure the brakes were on. The floor is not slanted, like I said, and it just moves. And we both kind of looked at each other and were like, okay, that's fine. We have these little necklaces that we hang on the doors to let people know when somebody's in a session. And sometimes I forget to put it on the other side of the door. And certain rooms like have the air conditioning like right under the door, so that makes sense. Sometimes it'll wave and stuff. But there are certain rooms where the air conditioning is not in there and it gets very hot in the rooms. And there should be no reason that the thing is swinging back and forth, but it will. It'll just start swinging very profusely, like back and forth. So that's another way that I know that they're kind of around. The spirits there, I do not feel like are evil in any way. They are just still there. They're just, I think a hotel is very busy. It has a lot of people coming in and out. And so that's a lot of energy that they can live off of. And I think that they were just kind of curious about continuing to be there. So the other scarier experience that I had was I used to do Ouija boards. I personally do not do them anymore. Just because, although just like any divination, pendulums, tarot cards, Ouija boards, they're all different ways of connecting with spirit in a way. But like, I feel like tarot and pendulums, you're more talking to your higher self versus like an actual entity. But Ouija boards, I don't think you should be afraid of them, but I think you should be very careful with them because you do not know what you're inviting. And sometimes when you think you're inviting a friend or a family member, it's something else. And I still to this day don't know if I was talking to somebody that I knew or if it was a dark entity, because the way the occurrence happened was I was asking about my sister because she had just moved out to Colorado. And I had this big old like picture, not big old, but it was a decent sized picture. It said like sisters are the best of friends. And it was very much one of those images that the way it was built, the frame was very deep set. So I mean, I'd had this thing on my wall for years, guys, and it had never fallen off the wall. Never. And during this Ouija board session, I was asking about my sister, and all of a sudden this picture goes flying off the wall, like flying off the wall, legitly, honest to God, goes flying off the wall, hits the floor. And I'm like, okay, that's really weird. At the time, I was talking to a spirit named Connor. He went to our high school, and we actually didn't even know him, but his number is 42. And so I know I guess, long story short, high school year was very rough for me. I pretty much wasn't there for most of the year. Beginning part of the year, I had mono. The second part, I was recovering from a knee surgery. So my sister was kind of alone during that time. And our friends were very busy with volleyball, so they weren't really around either. And so Kira used to sit by Connor's uniform. He had passed away from cancer, and his number is 42. And so I know Connor always watches over Kira. I don't know why, because he doesn't even know her, but he does, because we will very specifically see 42. She will a lot. Like her new house that she moved into has the address 42 in it. We'll see 42 just random times. Like, and we know it's Connor. And Connor doesn't speak to me a ton, but he usually lets me know when I need to check in with Kira, because he'll show me 42 and it's almost like this feeling that I need to just check in. And so that's how he communicates with me, but most of the time he watches over her. But anyway, I was trying to talk to him about her because obviously he on the other side, he can see a lot more than anybody else can. And so I was thinking, well, maybe I was talking to him. But when the picture so aggressively fell off the wall, I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm just nervous or if I'm scared, but I'm not getting a good feeling for some reason. And so, of course, I said goodbye, and that was the last time I ever used a Ouija board. Well, then 2 weeks later, Kira has an accident in Colorado, falls down a mountain. Like, she's okay. She's recovered, but she banged up her knee pretty well, had a little bit of a concussion. Still dealing with some of that today, but yeah. So I was like, oh, okay. And then it hit me. I was like, the spirit, whether it was Connor or not, was telling me that Kira was gonna fall down a mountain. That's why he wiped the picture off the wall, was to tell me that something was going to happen to her. But of course, it didn't click until later. And so it's just crazy things like that. And then the last story is last year, me and my husband and my sister and her boyfriend went to the Missouri State Penitentiary and stayed overnight, like 5 hours overnight. And that place is haunted, guys. Haunted, let me tell you. We didn't, well, that's not true. I did see some entities kind of. So in this one, they like take you around to different parts of the prison, and you usually get like an hour to roam around each part. And so in this one area, it was like this long row on either side with the cells, and then there was like this window at the far end. And so the guide, she was amazing. She was a witch. She was like a medium. She had wild stories. She was awesome. So I definitely recommend, if you live in the Kansas City, Missouri area, to go check that out if you're into the paranormal, or if you're just visiting, to come check that out, because it was very cool. She also had an EVP, the voice one, where you literally could hear someone say, "I was ripped apart." Like, just chills went down my spine. Cold spots in an area that had no air conditioning. Like, we were in the lowest level, no air conditioning, guys. Like, basement, no windows, no doors, cold spots rushing through the areas, orbs everywhere. There was, anyway, back to long hallway. She said to sit in the chair, face forward, and stare at the window. And as you did that, you could literally see shadows walking by, like either side of them. Like people going in and out of cells, just like shapes, just shifting down the hall. It was crazy. And then we went into this basement area, and the guide said that she's got a spirit that kind of like stands behind her and almost kind of hugs her. For some reason, he's pretty affectionate, and he was there. The space, I always knew, and he was shy. So he would go into his cell, but then like as she was talking, he would come up behind her, and like shadows are dark, right? But this was a darker shape behind her, and like the energy felt so heavy. Like it became like a blanket, like definite, like, so I could literally feel when he would retreat back and when he would come back. And he did it a couple times as she was talking. And I was like, he's there, isn't he? And she's like, yep, he is. And then, he would retreat, and the air would feel like calmer and lighter. And then he would come back. And it was wild. It was just wild. And it was like, I've experienced things, in my life, but just to be in such a haunted place, like the energy was just crazy. And yeah, you could tell there were some darker energies there. She told us some stories about some darker energies, and I'm the kind of person that I'm very open to spirits, but I'm also not open to dark entities. Like, I want nothing to do with them. I do not want to go searching for them. I do not want to talk to them. I only am interested in good spirits, good entities, earthbound spirits, because those I know can't hurt me. And even though the book said they can't hurt you unless you give them permission, a natural instinct for something that we don't know how to handle is fear. So it's much easier said than done to not be afraid of these things. I think those are the only stories that I have. So with that, like I said, definitely pick up this book. It is highly recommended by me. Thank you for listening to me ramble for almost an hour. If you liked the video, liked the content, please like or subscribe. Leave a comment below if you've had any fascinating paranormal experiences or any experiences that you just want to tell me about. I would love to hear them. And until next time, stay happy, stay healthy. Hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I will see you next time.